Welcome to the Clear to Send podcast, a podcast about wireless engineering, where we educate you on Wi-Fi technology, talk about design tips, troubleshooting, interviews, and the tools. Here are your hosts, Roel and Francois.
This show is happily sponsored by MetaGeek. Wi-Fi is awesome when it works, but when it doesn't, the problem is usually a mystery. Unless you have Insider Office by MetaGeek. Insider Office quickly scans your wireless environment and recommends ideal channel selection to help you make your Wi-Fi awesome, and keep it that way. Check out the solutions at metageek.com to get started, and get your Wi-Fi working the way you want it to. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Clear to Send podcast. We are on episode number 80. Glad you could join me. Unfortunately, Francois will not be joining us today because I had decided last minute to record very late in the evening. And being that he's 3 hours ahead of me, I decided to be nice and said, hey, you don't have to stay up and record. I will record this one solo. So here I am. My wife is out at a concert right now. I'm currently sipping on my number one tool for the evening, which is a nice glass of Malbec, which is from Sonoma Valley, Larson Family Winery. I highly recommend them. Just put my kids to sleep, so I'm watching them on the Nest camera, and hopefully they don't wake up. But here I am on this evening recording a new episode for you guys where we're going to talk about Wi-Fi apps for macOS. But before we talk about those apps, there's some news that we should talk about. Lately, or pretty recently, Andrew Van Aj released a capacity planner version 2. And what he said on this release, it's essential to wireless network performance and capacity planning is understanding the interaction between access point capabilities, network configuration, client device capabilities, and the RF environment. So Ubiquiti has partnered with Revolution Wi-Fi, that's Andrew Van Aj if you didn't know, to release version 2 of the capacity planner, and it improves a number of things such as capacity analysis, mesh network planning. He improved the growth planning, and you've now got exportable PDF reports. So you can check that out at our show notes. We have a link to his website about the release. Just head over to cleartosend.net/80 and you'll get that link, and check out the capacity planner. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section, and I'm looking forward to trying this out. In other news, we also have 3 new CWNEs that were announced this week, and there was actually a lot, but this week we have number 230, Robert Eubanks, number 231, Sean Sivak, number 232, Michael Lane. Congratulations to you guys, and it's awesome that we're now over the 230 mark. Since I last in last December, I was 210, so we're making the way there to a number of CWNEs. Wireless is definitely a primary point of access for everybody. It's very important, and now we're going to see a lot of experts come out there, CWNEs. The last bit of news that I have for you guys is there's new Wireshark online courses that were released by James Geringer and Jerome Henry. The 2 classes are called Wireshark Fundamentals from Live Lessons, and the other Live Lessons class is Wireshark for Wireless LANs. Again, I'll have the link out to those 2 lessons. I highly suggest you guys check those out. Purchase them if you can, because these are 2 awesome guys you should be learning from, and I'm sure gonna get my hands on those. Hopefully I learn a lot of great new things. There's more than 8 hours of instructions on at least the Wireshark for Wireless LANs live lessons. On the other one, there's about 5 hours of instruction there. So there's a lot of good stuff that should be coming out of those Wireshark courses, and that's what we're missing here is Wireshark for wireless, because we need that. But of course, you need to know the fundamentals of wireless and then go into or Wireshark fundamentals and then go into Wireshark for wireless. So check those out. So now we're going to dive into the Wi-Fi apps for macOS. Now, these are the apps that I use, and also the apps that Francois uses. So we're gonna just, in no particular order, they're not ranked at all, but the first Wi-Fi app on Mac OS. And again, these are just for Mac. We'll have another episode where we talk about Windows and iOS and Android. But in this episode number 80, we are going to focus on just talking about apps for Mac OS, because there's a growing number of Mac OS users, and we want to troubleshoot Wi-Fi, manage it, deploy it with Mac, because that's what a lot of us use. I use that as my primary laptop at my workplace. So the first Wi-Fi app that we're going to talk about is a Wi-Fi Explorer. Now, if you guys haven't heard about this app, it's really great. It's an excellent Wi-Fi scanner. This was created by Adrian Granados, who I actually interviewed back on episode number 7. So I'll link out to that in the show notes. And I talked to him about his development of these Wi-Fi apps for the community, and especially on the Mac OS platform, because there's a lot missing on the Mac OS platform as far as troubleshooting Wi-Fi, managing it, etc., just like I mentioned earlier. And the cool thing about Wi-Fi Explorer is, again, it's a very great Wi-Fi scanner to use. It's so simple to use, and it's also updated quite regularly. And you can see that whenever you open Wi-Fi Explorer. And just now that I just found out is you can find it on SetApp. So if you don't use SetApp, it's a service where you can get a number of applications if you pay, I think, a monthly or yearly fee, but you get a lot of great applications from this service, and Wi-Fi Explorer is one of those applications. And so it's got search built in. So if you're looking for a specific Wi-Fi network, you can search for that. If you're looking for something on 2.4 or 5, you can search for that. It's very dynamic. Its ease of use is primarily why a lot of people use it. And also, when you're looking at Wi-Fi Explorer, it'll visually show you what channels these Wi-Fi networks are taking up, especially if they're on DFS. And so what's cool, what I like about Wi-Fi Explorer is that if there's no Wi-Fi networks using DFS channels, it's actually not going to display those channels. So it condenses that graph, and you don't have a lot of big empty space. Another cool thing is the table in which it shows all the Wi-Fi networks. You can actually select a number of different columns and get very specific data from those wireless networks that you have displayed. Another cool thing within this application is viewing the information elements. You can look at advanced details for the Wi-Fi network that you select, and that means you don't even have to run a packet capture to see some of these information elements. In Wi-Fi Explorer, that's all in there, and you could expand some of those details and even see things such as what data rate is enabled or supported on these Wi-Fi networks. It's also easy to share screenshots from Wi-Fi Explorer, because I don't know about you, but a lot of us on Twitter seem to like sharing what Wi-Fi networks are available or how bad it looks for example. And what you could do is just drag that the visual part of Wi-Fi Explorer to your desktop, and it creates an image file for you that you can share with anybody. So I use this app regularly when I'm looking at nearby Wi-Fi networks. You can find this in the App Store. I think there's a pro version coming up, which will include some spectrum analysis and some remote Wi-Fi Explorer sensors, but hopefully we'll hear more from Adrian Granados. So that's Wi-Fi Explorer. And again, we'll have some links out to these apps for you just in case you want to check them out. If you head over to our show notes, cleartosend.net/80. So let's jump into our next app for Mac OS. This is another one that I use. It's called AirTool. It's another powerful app by Adrian Granados. And what this does is that it sets a menu bar application on your Mac, and it's capable of capturing Wi-Fi frames using your built-in NIC card, because the NIC card is great for capturing frames on the MacBook Pro, for example, or MacBook Air. and you can select a channel to capture frames from. And it's really neat because it's not just going to allow you to capture frames on whatever channel you're on. You can actually set the channel. So you can pick any channel on the 2.4, you can pick channels on 5 gigahertz, and then from there you can even set what channel width you want to capture the frame on. So if that's a 20 megahertz, 40, 80, or 160, you can do that. And once you start capturing frames, it'll tell you how many frames are being captured. And then when you stop that capture, what do you do with it? It actually saves a file for you on your desktop, and that can be used with Wireshark, CloudShark, or even Mojo packets. And so what's cool about that is the way I have mine set up is I will use AirTool and select the channel that I want to capture frames from. And when it's done, it'll just save that file directly on my desktop, and then it automatically opens in Wireshark. So that's pretty neat, right? And then I can just start analyzing instantly and get all that information. Another cool thing about AirTool is this feature called automatic data frame slicing. Now, I don't know, it sounds like pizza or something, like you're slicing pizza, but this is a great way to capture just the beginning of the frame if you don't care about the rest of the frame. It's useful for troubleshooting if you're just looking at frame exchanges, for example, and you don't need that payload. So with this option, you're only going to save layer 1 and 2 information, and you're going to ditch the rest. And this actually creates a much smaller file size for you, so that way you're not capturing unnecessary information for your troubleshooting purposes. Using AirTool, I think, is by far the fastest way to capture frames using a Mac, because that it saves that file automatically and opens it in Wireshark, for example. It's a lot easier than having to go into the command line and then putting your network card into promiscuous mode, for example, and then start capturing with a command line tool using T-Shark or something. This, I think, is much more cleaner. There's less room for any mistakes, and it's just one of my favorite apps to use because I use this all the time at conferences, when I'm at the airport, or when I'm in the field when I'm troubleshooting some issues. And the coolest thing here is that AirTool is free, so you can download this from Adrian Granado's website. And again, we'll have a link out in the show notes for you guys to check this out. So AirTool is free. The previous tool, Wi-Fi Explorer, is I don't think that's a free app, but you can purchase that in the App Store, and it's an inexpensive app to purchase on the App Store that'll be valuable for you. Hey everyone, let's take a break to think about Wi-Fi for a moment. It's awesome when it works, right? But when it doesn't, the problem is usually a mystery. If you're sick of simply rebooting your devices and crossing your fingers every time your Wi-Fi goes down, let the Wi-Fi experts at MetaGeek make the invisible visible. Their powerful diagnostic solutions visualize interference from external Wi-Fi and non-Wi-Fi sources, and will help you configure your wireless network for maximum coverage and throughput. From a weekend enthusiast to an enterprise IT professional, MetaGeek has everything you need to make Wi-Fi awesome and keep it that way. Check out their solutions at metageek.com to take your first step towards awesome Wi-Fi, because I use Channelizer to actually visualize the spectrum whenever I'm troubleshooting an issue that seems to be coming from maybe a non-Wi-Fi source, for example. And I've also used the Insider Office as a network scanner to figure out what wireless networks are in the area, what channels they're using, and which channels I should use. And just a little tip, you could also plug in your Wi-Fi DBX and use that with Insider Office to get some Channelizer Lite, for example. You can see some spectrum analysis with Insider Office. If you guys are interested, take a look at metageek.com to see what you can do for your Wi-Fi network. The next tool that I use, I think Francois uses too, is Wi-Fi Signal. Again, this is another application by Adrian Granados, and you should just get used to hearing his name. He builds a lot of great apps for macOS, and you'll continue to hear about him. He develops actively for macOS, and he takes a lot of feedback from the Wi-Fi community to help build tools that we could use. So Wi-Fi Signal is just an application. It's an easy way to check the status of the Wi-Fi network that you're connected to. And this will display things such as the quality of your received signal, your signal in dBm, the noise that your net card hears, and the SNR, and of course, what channel you're on. And now this is one of those status menu bar applications, and you click on the icon to see more details. You can receive notifications when you connect or disconnect from a Wi-Fi network. You can also receive notifications when you're roaming as well. And then also you can customize what you want to see in the status menu bar. So it's not just going to be an icon. You can add a little bit more to that icon. So you can put what your signal strength is, what channel width you're on, a lot more details. But for me, I like to keep it simple, and it's just the icon, and I click on it when I just want to see those details. But you may want to see more details, for example, when you're out in the field and you're trying to validate some settings and you just want that displayed easily and right away. This is a tool that can do that for you. And that, again, that's Wi-Fi Signal, and it's by Adrian Granados. Now, the next application, and we've had the developer of this application on the show before. And this application is called Ibuki. And Ibuki, we interviewed the developer on episode number 70, if you want to check that out. And what's cool about Ibuki is that it's not just a wireless application, it's also a wired application tool. But we're just going to focus on the wireless portion. And there is a wireless module that you add to Ibuki, and it gives you details on the Wi-Fi networks that are available, and it also displays important Wi-Fi statistics such as your the retry rates, your transmits and receive throughput, and not just for your device, but for devices even that are around you. So it makes it easier to analyze the client's performances. But of course, you got to be near those clients, right? And it'll make it a lot easier for you to determine, okay, what am I seeing a lot of retries from this client, and then help you troubleshoot further. You can capture statistics from wireless devices around you using the Wi-Fi monitoring from the client's perspectives. And again, I want to have you guys listen to episode number 70 because we go into that in more detail. And again, this also uses the built-in adapter of your MacBook Pro, and a lot of these apps that we use will use a built-in adapter because of the flexibility that we get using the built-in adapter. And so again, that application is called Ibuki, and that is a paid application. The next application that we're going to talk about, I consider, is a must-have application, and that application is called the Wireshark. And I did an episode on episode number 47 where I talked about troubleshooting Wi-Fi with Wireshark. The best thing about Wireshark is it's free, and it's a very useful application if you know how to use it. And so if you go back to the news, check out those live lessons that were just released, because you're going to want to know how to use Wireshark, get those fundamentals in place, and then use Wireshark to your advantage to troubleshoot Wi-Fi. You can customize a lot of columns using Wireshark. There was a post by Nigel Bowden, and I'll link out to that in the show notes, because he talks about customizing those columns just for wireless. And you can create a profile within Wireshark. So if you're just troubleshooting wireless, for example, you can create a profile for wireless, which will just load all those columns for you and any settings that are related to wireless. You could use Wireshark as a receiver of frame captures, for example, from a Cisco AP that's in sniffer mode. That's pretty useful. And you could also use it with AirTool, like I mentioned earlier. When you do a capture from AirTool, you can have AirTool open the capture within Wireshark by default. So again, that's Wireshark. That is a must-have application. If you don't have it, go and download it. Just Google Wireshark and you'll find it. The next application that I use, it's command line, but there are some visual versions of this, and it's iperf. And this is a way to do some throughput testing on your Wi-Fi network, just to do some like sanity checks, to do some bidirectional testing, just to make sure you're getting the throughput you need on your Wi-Fi network. So I place what is a Raspberry Pi, and I'm using iperf 2 on a Raspberry Pi. I have used iperf 3 as well, but currently I've been mainly using iperf 2, and I place the Raspberry Pi as closest to the user as possible. So in my network, I have the AP, which tunnels traffic back to a controller. So basically, I will have the Raspberry Pi kind of close to that controller, so there's not as many hops within the network between the user and the client device that I'm using to test and the Raspberry Pi or the iperf server. And so in the field, what I'll do is I'll use an iperf client, and I'll run some certain flags within iperf to test my connectivity. And I'll use that as a way to get an idea of what the Wi-Fi network looks like. Now, this is more accurate if you can use multiple devices with iperf to an iperf server. That way you can get a more realistic look into what throughput you're going to get on Wi-Fi. So that's iperf. There's a lot of blog posts out there on how to use iperf for Wi-Fi testing. I'll see if I can add some of those into the show notes, because I've been doing a lot more of the iperf testing lately. But what I could also do is write up a post as well. So another application that we will talk about is Insider Office, which is in beta, and this is created by MetaGeek. And so MetaGeek is primarily has Windows applications, but they do have a Mac version of one of their applications, and that's Insider Office. And this is a network scanner which identifies networks in the area. It's got a built-in search functionality, so if you're looking for specific Wi-Fi networks or some specific details, you can use the search box. And what I found pretty cool is that you can plug in a WiSpy DBX and get a light version of Channelizer. So you'll get some spectrum analysis, and the way that it shows the spectrum is there's going to be some a visual graph of the Wi-Fi networks and what channels they're on, and it'll overlay the spectrum on that same graph so you can see where the spectrum is being used up the most. So I thought that was pretty cool to get something similar to Channelizer on your Mac. So this one I have been using regularly lately just to test it out, and so far it's been pretty good. So highly recommend looking at that. And also MetaGeek is a sponsor of this episode, so highly check them out. I use their products quite a bit. The next application for macOS, which I hope many of you guys use, is Terminal. Or in my case, I use iTerm2. And what you could do is use Terminal or iTerm2 to start your SSH sessions. So the commands such as SSH-L and then the username and then the IP address or at the IP address, that there's some easy ways too that you can create some aliases to make it easy to SSH to devices. You could use it for your console sessions. I use it to connect to my Air console, for example, on macOS to connect to devices. And actually, Francois has a good blog post on how to easily use Air Console on Mac OS X. If you check out his blog at semfionetworks.com, I'll link out to his blog post directly in the show notes to check that out. And you could use Terminal also to validate your network settings using ifconfig. So if you haven't been getting used to command line, if you use a Mac, Terminal is the best way to get started. And also, if you include iperf on there, you'll be using some command line, and usually that's going to be through Terminal as well. So go ahead and check that out. Terminal is the built-in application that is within Mac OS. I highly suggest you or recommend you download iTerm2 because that'll give you things such as tabs. You can have two sessions open within the same window pane, for example. And if you need to send commands to multiple devices, if you have them all in the same tab or in the same, or have separate panes on the same tab, you can send a command to all of them. And with a simple shortcut, that's really easy to do. So again, that's terminal or iterm2. Now, the last application that I have on the list is Tamasoft Throughput Test, and Francois uses this. So this is a server that can be ran from macOS, and a client can be ran from anywhere. So it can be a macOS client, it can be a Windows client, and also the server can also be Windows. But I was trying to reserve that for a future episode, but you can run Tamasoft as a server or a client on any platform. So actually, the server is just macOS or Windows. The Tamasoft client can be macOS, Windows, Android, or iOS. And this is how Francois uses it the most because it's easy for him to use. There's a visual throughput tester in Tamasoft, so it's going to be easier to look at on a graph for throughput versus if you use iperf, where it's just lines of characters. You can even set QoS within Tamasoft Throughput Test, which is really great because if you want to test QoS, you're going to need to at least set those values within your throughput test, right? And you could test TCP and UDP as well. And that's the same with iperf. But with Tamasoft Throughput Test, you get something more visual than command line. So there you have it. There's our list of Mac OS applications. And again, I'll run through them real quick. That's Wi-Fi Explorer, AirTool, Wi-Fi Signal, Ibuki, Wireshark, iperf, MetaGeek's Insider Office, Terminal, Tamasoft Throughput Test. There they are. What do you guys think about these tools? What tools are you using on macOS, and which ones are your favorites or must-haves? Let us know in the show notes at cleartosend.net/80. That's where you're going to find all the links and resources and the news too that I have mentioned at the beginning of this episode. If you found this episode useful, please do share it with your colleagues via email and on social media. We would also greatly appreciate a review on iTunes, so you can let us know how we're doing, help us give us a little boost, and so we can produce more episodes. We love hearing feedback, so head over to cleartosend.net/iTunes, and that'll get you directly to the iTunes page for a review. We want to thank you guys for listening, and as always, we appreciate the feedback, support, and also the friendships we have made from the show. Thank you for listening again, and we will see you guys on the next episode.